No connection built on lies or falsehood is a true connection, and it's gonna be very hard to sustain it in the long run. I know sometimes for myself at least, it can seem easier in the moment to just tell a little white lie to make somebody feel good, or to avoid hurting someone's feelings, or get out of an uncomfortable situation. But the more we do this, the more we allow it to be okay, and it builds up, and you have to remember these lies, and then suddenly it all comes crashing down eventually. It may not be in those specific situations, but it may be in future situations, because the lies we tell within ourselves are taking us out of our integrity and splitting us into different directions that aren't true. And when we aren't living in truth and our integrity, then we run into a lot of problems along the way. Hi, I'm Julia. Welcome to my channel if you're new here, or welcome back if you've been here. This video is one that is kind of uncomfortable to make because I personally don't want to admit that I will tell little white lies sometimes to people please or to get out of an uncomfortable situation. But I do. We all do. And I wanted to share with you how I am starting to change that habit and how I'm catching myself doing it, because it's something that I have done for so long and so often that I've deemed it as okay. Like, I don't even see it as really being an issue until I'm like sitting with myself aware and being like, Julia, if you do that, then you need to remember that, and like the web that these lies create, because the more you tell them, the more you allow it to be okay for yourself to tell them, and then the bigger you spin your web. That's why they call it a web of lies. Charlotte's web of lies. It's literally like a spider web, because one connects to the other, which connects to the other, which connects to the other, and seemingly lies that are unrelated are now all related, because what's the common denominator building that web? You're the spider. So because of realizing this, I've taken it upon myself to start to slowly unravel that web and put less little white lies out into the universe, because even if they are small and seemingly unimportant and likely to not hurt anyone because they are no big deal, they energetically create a distance between you and the people that you are telling them to. And if the people that you are telling them to are people that you want to have true, honest connections with, then that's not good. And that's only going to drive you further and further away from those people, because whether they find out the truth or not, energetically, everyone always knows the truth. Like, you can feel it even if you don't know it, and it will drive a distance. So zooming out on that perspective and really taking that into account is what made me decide that I need to work on being more authentic to me and being more authentic and integrity with others. And for me, that means cutting out as many of those white lies as possible. The more I can be aware of them, the more I have to tell myself, even though it's uncomfortable, like, no excuses, be honest. But before we can even get to that point, we need to look at the reasons why we lie. And if you're watching this video, the reasons why you lie are probably not coming from a place of malintent. Of course, there are people in this world who might lie to get above or do something malicious or unkind. But I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you're doing it probably just to avoid an uncomfortable conversation and an uncomfortable situation, not hurt somebody's feelings, basically either to protect ourselves or others, and so on and so forth. So it's important to validate within yourself that you are not a bad person, and the reason that you're lying isn't because you're a bad person or that you're evil or you're trying to manipulate or hurt people. It's simply because you don't want to hurt people and you don't want to have uncomfortable conversations and you want to avoid negative situations at all costs. But the tool we're using for that is a negative tool that will lead to conflicts later down the line if we zoom out. So now that we got that out there, we're human. Like, it is what it is. We're not perfect. And when we are trying to be good people, sometimes we choose to tell a little lie so not to hurt someone. And an example of this that for some reason I keep doing, which I'm not doing anymore, but I was doing a lot, was when somebody would try to make last minute plans with me, I would make up some elaborate reason as to why I can't hang out instead of just saying the real reason, because I felt like the real reason wasn't good enough. So I thought I needed to give them like a more elaborate reason that seemed more valid. But the truth is, whatever reason I gave was valid in and of itself because it was my reason. Like, it didn't need to be some whole ordeal for me to not want to hang out with somebody last minute, because that's a boundary of mine that doesn't feel good to do most of the time. Whatever reason I gave, even if it was just just, oh, I'm tired and I feel like reading my book tonight, let's do a different day, that would have been fine. Like, that's probably what I was doing in actuality, but I would give a reason like, oh, I'm going to do something with my family, or oh, I'm going to visit my grandpa. I would give some other reason that involved other people or some type of activity to make it seem more valid and justified, when I could have just been like, I'm reading my book tonight and we can hang out this day or this day when I'm free. And that whole little white lie situation was stemming from me not feeling like spending time with myself wasn't a worthy or valid excuse to not want to hang out. And I didn't need an excuse anyway. I could just be like, I can't, but I'm around this day and this day. And I think I did do that a lot of times because it was just easier than lying, but sometimes I would come up with a reason like that and it felt icky. And then because I live my life so publicly, I had to make sure that if I was going to give that type of excuse to someone, that I didn't have them on my Snapchat, because I post everything I do on my Snapchat. So I had to make sure that if I did give an excuse, I was living in alignment to that excuse on my Snapchat and not actually lying if I had them on Snapchat, or I just had to make sure that I didn't have them on my Snapchat, because then I would get caught in the lie. And when I say the web of lies just keeps going, it just keeps going, because when you tell a lie, you gotta go with it. So that led to feeling even more icky. And I started to realize that a lot of the lies I would tell stemmed around my boundaries. If I would have just owned my boundaries and embodied them fully, then I wouldn't have to lie as much, because I would be like, that's a boundary, like, let me just say what it is. But I think because I'm so new to upholding boundaries and I'm still like a recovering people pleaser, that for me, telling these little excuses, these little lies, was my stepping stone into starting to have boundaries. But now that I have gotten better with upholding boundaries, I feel like I'm ready to start to let go of these little white lies or excuses that I make for my boundaries. So what lying really does to you, it makes you lose trust of yourself. You start to worry about covering your tracks to not get caught, like me not wanting to have people on Snapchat that I'm giving an excuse to, and it creates guilt and shame within you, which obviously isn't something you want to be creating within you, because we want to be living in our joy and our happiness and not in our lower emotional states. What lying really does to others, it causes them to lose respect and trust with you. It creates distance and destroys relationships, can cause feelings of being gaslit or stabbed in the back. I had a situation where I was lied to, and I always like to think back on these times when I was lied to, because it reminds me of all the reasons why I don't want to make lying a part of my personality, because of how it affected me being the person that was lied to. So I want to expand on how lying can create distance with both parties, the person who's lying and the person who's being lied to, even if they don't know they're being lied to, because we are energetic beings and we can feel things without somebody necessarily speaking to us. Actually, our communication is only 7% language. The 93% is through everything else. Energy, body language, facial expressions, actions. Only 7% is actually words. So even if the person believes your words or hears your words, their body is probably not believing the whole scenario. And I can get into an example of that where that happened to me. But first, let me describe how it creates distance. So if you're the person who's telling the lie, you're going to want to avoid the person that you're lying to. So you're actually going to start by creating the distance. That person is going to feel your avoidance. They're also going to feel like something is kind of off, like something is kind of up. Even if they don't know what it is, they're just gonna feel a vibe, just an off vibe. And that can cause maybe anxiety or a feeling of distrust, or just like an off feeling in the heart or the stomach. And that's like their body's indication trying to communicate that a lie is being told to them. And the other person is creating distance by literally distancing, or, you know, only seeing them in certain instances where they feel like they won't be caught or they won't be discovered that they're lying, you know, whatever it is. And this can be on a much smaller scale with a little white lie, but on a larger scale with a bigger lie, those feelings are a lot more palpable. On a littler scale, it's like, okay, it's a little off, a little weird, but we're gonna forget about it. We'll be fine. On a larger scale, it's like, oh my god, something is really wrong and I don't know what it is. So I'll give you an example of a time where I was actually lied to and I felt so anxious and off, and I found out the truth later because I did a little digging of my own, which may or may not have been the right move, but it did give me the clarity that I needed. So in one of my past relationships, I was with a person who would constantly gaslight me and tell lies, and I wanted to believe him so badly that he was telling the truth that I would override what I was feeling in my body and listen to his words anyway, because I really wanted to believe he was telling the truth. I really wanted to stay in the relationship and sustain it and make it work, but the body does not lie. So I would get these like crazy anxiety feelings, and then I would ask him like, what's going on, like what's this, what's that, and then he would start to distance himself. And because I was reacting in a very like intense way, asking a million questions, he would flip it onto me and be like, I need space, Julia, because you're accusing me of all these things that I didn't do. But in reality, it was actually him projecting his shame and guilt onto me because he was lying about doing something that he should not have been doing in our relationship. Because I was so confused, I couldn't see the truth. I couldn't understand what was really going on, and I took it upon myself and blamed myself for reacting. But when I was finally out of it and I was able to look at it from a zoomed out view, I was like, oh my god, all those times when he would just need space, need some time apart, those were the times he was doing stuff that he shouldn't have been doing, and then feeling guilty, feeling ashamed for it, and avoiding me, and then blaming me when I reacted by asking him where he's at, what he's doing, this and this. I was asking those questions because deep down I knew something was wrong, I knew something was off, and I was getting lied to. Whether he meant to hurt me or not, it still hurt. And being told the truth would have saved me so much confusion, so much stress, and so much time. Obviously, not everyone is going to tell you the truth. You have to use your own discernment, and we could do a whole different video on being able to decipher truth versus lies from people, because it is like a deeper inner body thing. It's not in your mind, because my mind was telling me, no, listen to him, like you love him, listen to him, you don't want to rock the boat. But my body was making me react like, I don't trust this, I'm going to ask, I'm going to question, I'm going to interrogate. But that wasn't coming from my mind, that was coming from my body, because my body was reacting to the truth. I'm actually reading this book right now called The Heart's Code, if you guys want to look it up, but it's basically about how our hearts have an intelligence within them, and they interact with other people's hearts as well as our magnetic field. Like they project out into our electromagnetic field and interact with other people with the field and the heart connection. And when you listen to your heart, it completely bypasses mind chatter, intrusive thoughts, lies, because it's going straight to the source of the truth. So when you start tuning into your heart and listening to your heart, that is when you can figure out truth. That is when you realize you need to speak the truth. So the more you tune into your own heart, the more you are able to just speak your truth and be as authentic as you can, because the most important thing we can be to build connections, not only with other people, but also ourselves, is by living in truth from our hearts. That's how we're going to build the most fulfilling, loving, caring, mutually beneficial connections, is by being true to ourselves. And the more true that we are to ourselves, the more truthful that we can be to others. So by building a really, really strong inner authenticity, then we can start to build the foundations to have that with everyone and everything else. So that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one next week. I love you guys so much. Bye!